Well, it was called the trial of the century. Another one said it was the trial that riveted the nation. It was the Caylee Anthony case. Hundreds, literally hundreds of pieces of evidence were submitted. Over 91 people got into the witness chair. And yet, at the end of it all, nobody really knew what happened to little Caylee Anthony. Well, we're going to attempt to answer that right here on today's Charlie Crimebuster. What some people have termed the fastest minutes in podcasting. Well, hello and welcome to the Charlie Crimebuster Show. We're glad to have you on board. You see, it was on July the 15th, that's July the 15th, 2008, that's when a 911 call was placed by Caylee Anthony to the Orange County Sheriff here in Orlando, Florida. She was reporting that her vehicle had been stolen by her daughter. Sometime later, another call by Caylee Anthony. Now, she said that her granddaughter had been missing. This one, well, it was followed by a third call, now stated that her granddaughter had been kidnapped. Well, my friend, that call started a process that led to a trial of the century. It was also called the trial that riveted the nation. That trial was viewed by more than 41 million people. And the process of the trial, well, it cost taxpayers over $800,000. And it also led to a great mystery. A mystery that has not been solved to this day. The mystery of just how did this little girl named Caylee Anthony, Caylee, who captured the heart of a nation, how did she really die back in 2008? Well, we're going to discuss the process, and we're going to give you the real theories on how this little girl lost her life. And while we have done some preliminary reporting on this case, well, we have yet to give it the deep dive that it really deserves. We're now ready to do just that. First, let's get some housekeeping out of the way, and once again, express sincere appreciation to the listeners of Charlie Crimebuster. If you are a regular listener to our podcast, or if this is your first time ever, I want to personally welcome you to our podcast. You are what drives the podcast, and we do appreciate the kind words and encouragement you give. Please let me invite you to become a regular subscriber to the podcast. Go to charliecrimebuster.com. There you will find a podcast platform to subscribe to the podcast. Also, during the month of January, well, we're inviting our regular listeners to take a peek at our new project called the Peacemaker Network. You see, the Charlie Crimebuster mission is to educate the public and to encourage the police. We've been doing just that, but now we feel it's time to double down on our encouraging the police part of our mission. Our brave men and women in law enforcement, well, they deserve our help now more than ever. Now, you also will be able even to join with us in the Peacemaker Network and help make a difference in the lives of our heroes. That is, our cops, other first responders, and the military. So why don't you go on over there, peacemakernetwork.com, take a quick look at our coming project. Hey, and let us know what you think about it. We welcome your suggestions and your comments. You can reach me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Take time to look at the peacemakernetwork.com. Now, this past month, as of right now, get this, 24 police officers have been shot in the line of duty. My friend, our cops are under attack. It's up to us to support them, so take a moment and join with us. Check out the peacemakernetwork.com. Today, if you're a police officer, well, my friend, you can expect danger, tremendous stress, and even prosecution. That's all while attempting to do your duty. Officers today are under the most pressure you can possibly imagine, yet they still place themselves in danger day after day. These heroes, yes, along with other first responders and military, they need our vital support. So be a part of that network today. Check it out, peacemakernetwork.com. Well, our focus today is on the trial of the century, when Caylee Anthony called authorities on that night in 2008. Well, officers, they responded to the Anthony house in Orlando. They learned that Caylee Anthony's daughter, little Caylee Anthony, she had been missing for over a month. Now, when asked as to why she did not immediately report her missing, well, one of her many answers was that she was afraid that reporting it to the police would endanger her daughter and family. That was just one of many things that Casey would utter to the police. Well, in fact, in Orlando, it was said pretty quickly that you could always know when Casey was lying. It was when her lips were moving. Well, first she lied about Zanny the nanny taking little Caylee. That's what she told investigators. She even told them where Zanny the nanny lived, took them to Zanny's apartment the next day, only to find that apartment never existed. She also misled the cops about where she worked. She told them she worked at the Universal in Orlando, and she took them to the job, took them over to the job site, even walked them down the hall to her imaginary office, then stopped, admitted to cops that she did not work there. She was quite convincing with her tales. She had successfully lied to her parents for almost 2 years about a job she did not have. She had been fired from Universal almost 2 years ago, and yet pretended to go to work. Even more incredible, well, she and little Casey, they lived with her parents. Yes, she still was able to convince her parents that she went to a job. Now, did they really believe her, or were they just afraid to admit that they knew she was lying all the time? And she just did not lie to her parents. Well, little Caylee, she had not been seen in over a month. During that time, she lied to her boyfriend, she lied to her friends, she lied to her brother, and she lied to others about the whereabouts of little Caylee. And her lies and her reports, well, it started a nationwide manhunt for little Caylee. It lasted over 4 months. However, interesting enough, the defense gave what some people called real insight to make others consider why there was a reason for her lies. And we will find out in due course that some people said the apple did not fall very far from the tree. That's according to some. Well, in a moment, we're going to get to the timeline of her crime. But right now, it's time for us at Charlie Crimebuster to recognize what we call our Courageous Citizen of the Week. And boy, I love this one. For a little 8-year-old girl, well, a crossing guard. A crossing guard, well, that turned out to be her guardian angel. That is, when the crossing guard rescued her from an attempted abduction. Adrienne Young, she's been a crossing guard for more than 15 years. She had just finished her shift there at the Alexandria Avenue Elementary School there in Los Angeles. That's when the 4 foot by 8 little petite lady. Well, the little 4 foot by 8 crossing guard, she saw a woman grab an 8-year-old girl in front of the school. She heard the little girl's cries. And this petite crossing guard, she did not even think twice about grabbing the youngster's arm, freeing her from the woman's grasp. This little girl started screaming. She was like, "Please don't take me. Don't let her take me. I don't know her. She's not my mom." That's what Young told 13 ABC. Young went on to say, "I just told her to grab onto me as tight as she could, and I held on to her, and the lady just began to attack me. So I just thought about attacking her to make sure she did not take this little girl." Young received, of course, recognition and applause for her heroism that day. But yet she remained modest, said she was just doing what any mother would. She said, "I'm very grateful for all the accolades, but I just did what I felt was right." That's what Young said, who's a mother herself. She went on to say, "I felt that if it was my child, I would want someone to protect her. I could not see myself letting that little girl be taken." Well, City Councilman Mitch O'Farrell, well, he gave Young flowers, a certificate of appreciation, praised her for coming to the girl's aid. He went on to say, and this is great, he said, quote, "Sometimes heroes come in small packages." Well, Adrienne Young, well, she prevented a tragedy. And because of her diligence, her training, her awareness, and just because she cares so much about children, my friend, she prevented a kidnapping of a child. You see, heroes, my friends, they do come in all sizes. Young also, by the way, received a tearful hug from the girl's mother, Sharon. She said, "If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't know where my daughter would be right now." That's what the little girl's mother told NBC Los Angeles. You see, it's easy to stand by and not help, even when someone is in a difficult situation. But even we know something isn't right, It's up to us who are nearby to take action and help those in danger. And that, my friend, is our Charlie Crimebuster Courageous Citizen of the Week. Now, our focus today is on the Caylee Anthony story. You see, little Caylee Anthony, she's been missing for over a month, and the nation wakes up to a story of a little girl who was kidnapped by the babysitter. Or was she? First of all, we're going to talk about the timeline of the Caylee Anthony case. It was on June the 16th, 2008. That was when Caylee drove off with little Caylee for the last time that people remember seeing her alive. Caylee, she was raised in the Orlando home of her grandparents. That's Cindy and George Anthony. But the day after an alleged family argument, that was on Father's Day, June the 15th, well, Caylee then left with her young daughter, and she would rebuff efforts to reconcile in person. Then on July the 15th, 2008, that's almost a month later, well, Cindy reports that Caylee is missing. And that was after learning that a family car that had been used by Caylee, well, had been impounded. And when George, he retrieved the car, well, he was overwhelmed by the smell that remained even after a bag of trash was removed from the trunk. Cindy, well, she tracks down her daughter later that day over a whole bunch of 911 calls. And then she reports that Caylee's been missing for a month. She demands Caylee's, her daughter's, arrest, and she notes the vehicle odor. She says it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car, quote unquote. Then on July the 16th, well, that's when Caylee was arrested. You see, Caylee, she led investigators on a pair of wild goose chases. First, to an uninhabited apartment of the nanny called Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. This was the one who allegedly had ran off with Caylee on June the 9th. She even then took them to Universal Studios where Caylee pretended to have a job. Well, then she was arrested, charged with child neglect, lying to investigators, and interfering with a criminal investigation. Then it was on July the 22nd of 2008, that's when Caylee, the mother, was declared a person of interest at a bond hearing. Well, that hearing, well, it introduced evidence that a cadaver dog had zeroed in on the odor of human decomposition in the car trunk, and also in the Anthony's backyard. Then they also used Cindy's admission that they had all seen Caylee after June the 9th. You see, now, although Caylee has been held on relatively minor charges, well, the judge, he seems to be pretty upset about this, enough by the evidence that he sets that bail, get this, at $500,000. Yet, surprise, surprise, her bail is actually posted. Yes, on August the 20th of that same year, 2008, a California bounty hunter by the name of Leonard Padilla, well, he announced that he had paid the $500,000 bond. He was hoping that Caylee would get out of jail and then lead them to where little Caylee really was. Some people still thought she was hiding out Caylee to keep Caylee from her parents. But then more news comes out about the actions of Caylee's mom, Caylee. And then on August the 30th, 2008, well, that bond, it's rescinded. That reversal comes a day after Caylee was arrested, this time for allegedly stealing and cashing checks from a friend. And of course, the angry crowds demonstrating outside of the Anthony's home, certainly that contributed to the decision to revoke the bail. Now, according to that bounty hunter, you know, the bounty hunter put up the $500,000 bond. Well, he said, I came. I gave it my best shot. She did not want to talk to me. What can I say? That's what Padilla said. But then, get this. Anthony, well, she was again released after other parties combined to post the bond on September the 5th. But, hold on. By the end of the month, she's back in jail. Because on October the 14th, 2008, now Caylee is charged with first-degree murder. And the unsealed indictment, it also charged her with aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter, 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement. But in response, a lawyer comes to the scene. Jose Baez. He says his child's actions will become clearer at trial. Quote, I sincerely believe when we have finally spoken, everyone, and I mean everyone, will sit back and say, now I understand. That explains it. Then on October the 24th in 2008, well, forensic reports from an examination of Casey's car are released. And this is what the report says. The report says that there was a hair strand discovered in the trunk. And they said, quote, it was microscopically similar to those found on Caylee's brush. And that one hair showed characteristics of an apparent decomposition. Additionally, there was an air sample that was taken from the trunk. And it was found to contain chemical compounds that was consistent with human decomposition. By the way, when we get to the trial part, you're going to find that air sample, well, it was actually submitted as evidence in the trial. And it made history. It was the first time that any evidence like this had ever been considered evidence in a trial. You can rest assured that evidence was attacked. It was attacked by the defense. So now we still have a manhunt all this time still going on for little Caylee. That manhunt brought thousands of people to the surface to search for little Caylee. The 101 square miles of Orlando was poured over by just about anybody you can possibly imagine. They came from afar to help aid in the search. They searched for over 3 months. And then on December 11th, 2008, well, the skeletal remains of a young girl are discovered. You see, the bones were found in a bag in a wooded area, and I get this, less than a half a mile from Anthony's home. They were found by a utility worker by the name of Roy Kronk. Now, it was later revealed that Kronk had sought to convince the police to search that area way back in the summer, a few months before then. Then on December the 20th, 2008, well, there was confirmation. The confirmation was that they were those of Caylee, the remains were. It was the Orange County Chief Medical Examiner. She reported that the bones showed no evidence of trauma, though, and Caylee's death is being ruled a homicide, now get this, of undetermined means. Now, there was also some duct tape that was involved in this finding of the child's skeletal remains. That duct tape has become a part of the case. You're going to hear a whole lot more about that duct tape in the coming moments that we'll be discussing this case. Now, there was also some stranger things happening with the Anthony family. Because on January the 23rd, 2009, well, Caylee's grandfather and Casey's father, well, he was taken into custody. He was actually taken into custody. This was after, now get this, a suicide attempt. You see, George, the grandfather and father of Casey, he was reported to be despondent and possibly under the influence of medication and alcohol. He was located at a hotel in Daytona Beach, Florida. And along with him was a five-page suicide note. Now, does this mean that Casey's father had anything to do with the crime? Well, more news on that to come. Then on April the 13th, 2009, well, now prosecutors now announce that not only are they going to try Caylee for the murder of her daughter, they're going to also pursue the death penalty. Now, you see, even though earlier court papers indicated that the death penalty would not be in play, well, there was a new notice of intent, and it cited that there was sufficient aggravating circumstances to justify its imposition. We're going to get into that trial part next. But right now it's time for us on Charlie Crimebuster to share with you what we call our crazy crook story. We do share some pretty dark things about crime on Charlie Crimebuster, and so sometimes it's good just to lighten it up, lighten the load a little bit with a crazy crook story, and believe me, in Florida we have plenty of those. This one comes to us from Melbourne, Florida. Now get this. A naked Florida man, well, he stole a pickup from a dealership. He led police on a pursuit early Wednesday. That was in Melbourne, Florida. Melbourne police said that Richard Bose, 40 years of age, well, he was at the Fiat of Melbourne before 7 a.m. An employee had seen him standing naked in a paint booth. That was before the man got into a 2021 Ram truck. Bose then backed out of the booth in the pickup and drove off from the dealership. That's what police said. Now, the Melbourne Police Department, they had video that showed Boss at a dealership at just before 5 a.m. Then he was wearing only underwear, walking around the business, getting into another car, and sitting on the roof for 30 minutes. That was before he stole the Ram. Now, once police contacted the truck's owner, officers, they were able to track the truck, and they located it going north on Interstate 95. The department said an officer in an unmarked vehicle saw the truck driving erratic, striking a guardrail multiple times. Then officers reported that the truck exited in Cocoa before authorities were able to stop Boss and take him into custody. Now, Boss, he made his first appearance on a Thursday at the Brevard County Jail, and there he was denied bond. Now, neighbors of Boss on Longbow Road, well, that's where the arrests were made, they said that this guy has a habit of losing his clothes. He was out on bond, then on a charge of exposing himself just last month. And get this, he's been to Brevard County Jail, well, for a total of 12 times in the last 3 years. Now, the neighborhood, they're not too happy about it. They said, quote, "We want him out of the neighborhood because we have young kids and teenagers here." That's what Kenneth Richmond said. "We don't need him stripping as he has been." Now, according to a report, Boss, he told officers that he did not steal the truck, but that someone in a red shirt told him to take it. Well, I imagine he hears all kinds of voices. Police said that this guy is on felony probation, and he now faces new charges of unoccupied burglary to a structure, unoccupied burglary to a conveyance, grand theft of a motor vehicle, criminal mischief, violation of probation, driving with a suspended license, and leaving the scene of an accident with property damage. And that, my friend, is one crazy crook. Well, if you're going to steal cars, you might think you might want to put some clothes on first. And that, my friend, is the bare facts. Excuse the pun. And this, my friend, is Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now, crazy crooks aren't the only things that happens here in Orlando, Florida. We also have the trial of the century. It's a location of what many people have considered the trial of the century. That's where 41 million people tuned in on TV. People actually stood in line all night long to try to get seats in the courtroom. There was even a fight that broke out with those trying to get the head of the line, all right here in Central Florida. But back to our timeline. Now, on May the 24th, 2011, well, the trial starts. And my friend, I want you to know, the prosecution started out, and they called Casey a party girl of no use for a young daughter. And that was evidenced as a month spent shopping and drinking during Caylee's absence. But those remarks, well, they're soon eclipsed when Jose Baez, he gives a stunning open statement. And he says that Caylee actually drowned in the family swimming pool and that George, the father, he sought to cover up the accidental death. The lead defense lawyer, he also alleged that George had molested Casey. Therefore, that was her habit of lying, that it came from covering up the pain. And he also went on to say that Kronk, that utility worker, well, the one who found Caylee's body, he says that Kronk planted it in the woods. And taking the stand as the very first witness, well, it's her father, George Anthony. And there he denies that he ever molested his daughter or knew anything about Caylee's drowning. Then on May the 27th, 2011, there's a witness who offers his theory about the smell in Casey's car. It was a guy by the name of Simon Birch. He was the manager of the towing company that had impounded Casey's car. That was back in June 2008 as it was left there at an Am South parking lot. He testified that he had encountered multiple vehicles with dead bodies during his 3 decades in the business. And he goes on to say that he says the smell from Casey's car, well, it was consistent with those decomposed bodies. Now, that same day, the fiancé of Casey's brother, he also took the stand, and he described the very special bond that she observed from Caylee and her mother. Then on June the 6th, 2011, Another forensic expert takes a stand. And he comes all the way from the state of Tennessee with the Tennessee Volunteers. And it was Dr. Vass of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. He explained, quote, unquote, shockingly high amount of chloroform, a chemical released by decomposition, as well as one that also can be used to knock someone unconscious. And he said that high amount was detected in the car trunk. That led to his conclusion that a dead body was indeed present in the trunk of the car. However, his testimony, well, it was contradicted, actually, the following day, and this was by an FBI scientist. And he compared the chloroform level in the trunk, well, to just the same amount that was found in household cleaners. Now, on June the 8th, 2011, well, the jury had something else to consider. There was a software designer, and he testified, quote, now get this, that someone had searched for chloroform, get this, a whopping 84 times. And it also looked up such terms as head injuries, ruptured spleen, chest trauma, and internal bleeding. He said that was on the Anthony's home computer in March 2008, and that it was happening during the regular hours that George and Cindy would be working. But then, get this, when just you think you know what's going on, well, the designer then comes back and he says there was an error. There was an error in his detecting software, and that it determined that the user had visited the site related to chloroform only once. Then on June the 23rd, 2011, well, there's another bombshell. This time, Cindy, Casey's mother. It was a crucial day for the defense because Cindy claimed that she was the one who researched chloroform on her home computer. She testifies also that a stain found in the trunk, allegedly caused by Caylee's decomposing body, well, she says, no, that wasn't it at all. She said it was actually there. That stain was when the family purchased the car 8 years earlier. Then on July the 3rd, 2011, well, the two sides, they then present their closing arguments. Now, continuing with the narrative that Casey was overly burdened by Caylee, well, the lead prosecutor, Jeff Ashton, he continued to emphasize to the jury how the young mother was motivated enough to go to extremes to achieve her freedom. He went on to say, quote, something needed to be sacrificed, and that something was either the life she wanted or the life that was thrust upon her. That's what Ashton said. He said that she chose to sacrifice her child. Now then comes Jose Baez, that defensive lawyer. You see, he was forbidden at this point from revisiting the unsupported molestation claims, but he delivered a very effective closing argument, pointing out the lack of evidence that could ever really place Caylee's body in the trunk of the car or even tie Casey to her daughter's death. Now, on July the 7th, there were a lot of protesting, that you can imagine, outside the Orange County Courthouse. And then after 6 weeks, after almost 6 weeks now of testimony, 400 pieces of evidence was presented in court. Well, the jury of 7 women and 5 men, get this, they take less than 11 hours. After 400 pieces of evidence, this jury took less than 11 hours, and the verdict they reached was not guilty. Did you get that? Not guilty. And then Casey, well, she's sentenced to time already served. You see, she received a 4-year sentence and a $4,000 fine for the 4 counts of lying to the police. But the prison time, well, it's canceled out by the near 3 years she already spent behind bars, and that along with credit for good behavior. And so on July the 17th, she's released from the Orange County Jail shortly after midnight. Now, the real problem with this is so far, no one really knows how little Caylee died. And there's new information now that has been released after the trial. Would that new information make a difference? Well, we're going to tell you all about that next week. And I'm going to tell you my theory. I'm going to tell you my theory on how I believe little Caylee really died. So the question remains, a little girl's dead and there's no explanation of how. Did she die of an accidental drowning? It is the leading cause of death among children here in Florida. Or was she killed by her mother who wanted to just live a life of partying? Now, there was duct tape on the body. Now, was that duct tape used to secure the blanket and wrap into the body, much like the Anthony's beloved pets were buried on the Anthony property? Or was that duct tape used for another reason? We're going to cover that and a whole lot more on next week's Charlie Crime Buster, so stay tuned. And until then, let me encourage you, be alert, be safe. For the life you save, it may be your very own.